We're live?
I believe so.
Welcome, everyone, to Rules of the Arena, episode 34. This episode is made possible by Blind Ninja Studios, where you can find this show and others such as Department of Defense, Homebrew Bound, Soundwave, and Legends of Lothos, and my new show called No Story Left Behind. We are also brought to you by Duck Hill Workshop, a small-scale sawmill and builders of fine furniture. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, both at Duck Hill Workshop. And don't forget to subscribe. God, I'll get it right one of these days.
No, you
to their
won't.
YouTube channel, where you can watch episodes of Workshop Wednesday. In the studio with me tonight is my co-host Ben, who's also doubling up as producer since Casey cannot be with us, unfortunately.
Hello.
And joining us from Tennessee is Josh from Amputee Blade Runners. If you have listened to episode 27, you might have heard about Amputee Blade Runners from our conversation with Sydney Smith. Thank you, Josh, for taking the time to chat with us. Please just introduce yourself a bit to the folks listening.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Like I said, my name is Joshua. I am shooting for single name status, so you don't have to worry about anything else. Just Joshua, like Madonna, Cher, folks like that.
How's that working?
Yeah, I picked a really difficult name to try to achieve that, but it's a great goal. But yeah, I have been the executive director of Amputee Blade Runners. We provide sports legs or running legs for active amputees across the country. We have about 40 states covered at this point, and all of the services that we provide at no cost.
That's awesome.
So how did you first get in touch with or get started with Amputee Blade ABR?
Yeah. So I've known there were really three men that were responsible for the creation of ABR. Two of whom I had known and actually even worked with before they started it. So the three guys were Aaron Fitzsimmons, Ryan Fan, and Nick Campbell. Aaron and Ryan are both prosthetists, and I used to work with them in a vascular surgery practice when Aaron was running the prosthetics for that organization. He still does, and Ryan was doing his residency. And then just because the world is a small place, I didn't meet Nick until after I had already accepted the position and was working through everything. And as it turns out, his grandparents and my wife's grandparents were best friends decades ago.
So did you go to medical school, and originally plan on working in a vascular surgery office?
No, medicine, healthcare were not at all on my radar. In my original plans for goals, I started off actually with, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I wanted to be a judge. I figured that would be a great thing. The only way I knew how to do that was go to law school and learn a lot about the law. And then as I realized going through law school, I had about a year to go, I realized this isn't really where I see myself. Even if I want to be a judge, that's maybe 2 or 3 decades down the road if all of the right things happen to fall into place. And it's hard to bet your whole life on a maybe. So I started examining why I wanted to do that job, and I realized that the itch that I wanted to scratch was problem solving and helping people. I realized that healthcare was a great place for that. So I had worked, at the time I was already working in vascular surgery practice, put myself through school, and that just seemed like a great way. My wife was also in PA school at that time, so it made the common language a lot easier. So there were a variety of reasons that encouraged me to move from one career path to another. But it's been 15 years and counting, and I'm having a blast.
How much did that throw a wrench into your graduation, going from law school into a medical field?
I still graduated. I stopped doing anything after graduation. I had, since I knew that I didn't want to practice law, I didn't have to study for the bar. So in a lot of ways, that helped out a lot. It meant that I had a lot of other things to learn. A lot I learned as I went. And then a couple of years ago, I went through a master's in management for nonprofits, which of the past 15 years I've been in healthcare, the past about 10 I have been in nonprofit healthcare. And I thought it was time to get some formal education on the specific sphere that I had wound up in. I thought after I'd been doing it for 7 years, it's probably time to, this is what I want to do. I'm enjoying it. I'm not going to jump to a completely different career field. I might as well stay and learn as much as I can.
Sure. And I honestly didn't know anything about ABR until we were talking to Sid, and I started looking you up on social media. How did you first find out about them, and when did you officially join the team?
Sure. So I'll answer that in reverse. I started about 2 years ago. Uh, I have always known about ABR ever since it first started. They started about a year or so after I left the same vascular surgery practice that Aaron and Ryan were working with, but I had stayed friends, Facebook friends, personal friends. Ryan has since moved to, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. He is in Savannah, Georgia now, so we hadn't, physically seen each other much, but I had stayed in touch with Aaron. And really, the genesis story behind ABR is one that I love, and I'd love to share it with you. But it really started. Ryan was the impetus for it. So Ryan grew up as a child of the '80s, like everyone else. He grew up riding a big wheel. So when he was about 3, he was riding his big wheel around the neighborhood, and a guy in a pickup truck just wasn't paying attention, hit him and dragged him about 100 feet or so, wound up at Vanderbilt University here in town, and had what's called an ankle disarticulation. So removed the ankle and foot, and the rest of the leg was able to remain intact. And Ryan did not have necessarily the best of home life circumstances, but he didn't let any of those things hold him back. So he went to the Shriner system. In the closest one is in Kentucky. It's about 3.5 hours or so away from Nashville, and went there for his prosthetic care, which they did a great job of providing him for walking feet. But a running leg was just not something that they offer to him, or really what it's kind of outside of their sphere or their goals. So he wasn't going to let anything like, well, I don't have a foot, and the foot that I have is meant for walking and nothing else. His dad had said, like, hey, I'm not treating you any differently than I would if you had 2 feet. So it's great that you want to play football. You got to mow the lawn. I'm not putting you in a bubble rack. Get out there and live your life. And as he was, doing that, he told me recently that he could tell that his foot was about to break when he started liking how it felt. It was the process of the foot slowly cracking and breaking. But he was a very good athlete, was the MVP of the special teams unit on his high school football team. And then he was actually the first amputee that Shriners asked to play in their Tennessee East-West Shrine Bowl, kind of their big awareness, fundraising, see what we are doing, support us kind of event. And in the middle of this game, Ryan breaks his foot off. And Ryan just sees this as, well, yeah, I mean, I break my foot off all the time. And goes over to the sideline, grabs a roll of duct tape, duct tapes his foot back on, and, all right, coach, put me back in. I'm ready to go. I think most people who were watching that were a little surprised. And one guy in the prosthetics industry, he was not a prosthetist, but had a relationship with one, and said, hey, you should see this kid. Like, he is really getting after it. He needs something more. So a guy, made Ryan a running blade and said, here, I want you to have this. I want to take care of you in this way. I know you can't afford it. This is it's my way of helping others. So Ryan used that. He had already I think he had a partial scholarship at the time to go to Tennessee State University, which has a huge Olympic track and field history. That's where Wilma Rudolph went. If you have seen the documentary, The Lady Tiger Bells, it's just a fantastic program. I believe that TSU alum actually have more Olympic medals than the majority of countries that participate in the Olympics. So just great, no pun intended, track record there. So through those relationships, Ryan runs with able-bodied athletes on his college track team. I think is the first amputee to compete in a Division I conference championship, and then winds up running in the Athens Paralympics. So he is, out there. He's in the same Olympic Village with Michael Johnson and, all of the track folks that probably everyone in the U.S. knows and remembers. And Ryan won the individual bronze and a team gold medal. He toured with the traveling Paralympic team for a few years after that. and is still the world record holder for the 60-meter sprint. So after he finishes all of that, he missed the Beijing qualifiers by something like 300ths of a second, like about as close as you could possibly be to making it and not quite getting there. So then he's 25, trying to decide what am I going to do with the rest of my life, in a similar situation that I had been in just a couple years before. And he realizes, hey, prosthetics has meant a tremendous amount to me. I would like to stay in this industry. Went to Northwestern, became a prosthetist, and then as he's doing his residency back in his hometown in Nashville, he's doing it with Aaron, who had been in prosthetics for 10 or so years at that point. He got his start doing just some volunteer work for the guy that ran the prosthetics for St. Jude's in West Tennessee, in Memphis. And he had been told by Ronnie, that prosthetist, like, hey, you've got a lot of talent. If you wanted to become a prosthetist, you could be a really good one. So Aaron had done that, and then sets up his own practice a few years later back in Nashville. He's doing overseas prosthetic mission stuff in addition to his regular job. And then he and Ryan are on a run one day, and Ryan says, every good thing that I have can be traced directly or indirectly to someone giving me a running blade and not charging me for that, and I would love to give that to other people. I don't want that to just be me that benefits from that. And so really ABR is a combination of their ideas of service to others in general, but specifically it wound up being a focus on folks in the U.S. who need a running blade, and more than just a piece of equipment, they need that whole person care that comes with prosthetics. So when ABR says yes to someone, it is not just, hey, here's a blade, best of luck. It's no, come spend a week with us. We're going to make this work for you. We're going to make a socket. We're going to get whatever blade you need. If you need a prosthetic knee, we'll get that. Any components that you need in order to be really successful, we're going to provide that for you. And then, really the third person in there, Nick, does all the fabrication. So prosthetists do the measuring, casting, and the design of how they're going to get something to suspend, how to hang on to your leg. And then Nick's job is really to make that dream come true. So using carbon fiber and whatever additional components to create that long-lasting thing that will hold on to their leg and will be comfortable. And then you're putting running blade on that, knees on that, too, if you're bilateral, whatever it is. So that's really our genesis story.
Sure. You said people come and come stay with us for a week, and we're going to work with you. I think everybody's seen Forrest Gump, and the character Lieutenant Dan. He lost both his legs at war, comes back, and he hits a pretty hard bout of depression, and it takes him. Eventually comes back out of it. But do you see or work with any patients that are kind of in that similar spot? They're like, Sid talked about, when he first had his amputation, went through depression at first. Are you guys trained or equipped to help with that, or at least refer someone to, well, here's a therapist or whatever the case may be to help?
Right. Yeah, and if Sid did not share some pictures, you should ask him for the times that he has dressed up as Lieutenant Dan, because it's a spot on picture. So get that from him at some point. But yeah, it's limb loss is just death of a spouse in terms of grief predictor. It's really about the hardest physical, emotional thing that someone is going to go through. There were times when I was working in the vascular surgery practice where one of my roles was scheduling amputations. I'd be scheduling any kind of surgery, but I've been multiple times in the instance where the doctor says, I'm sorry, we're going to have to remove part of your limb. And then and the very next step is go down the hallway, and Joshua's going to pick a time for me to do that. So I've interacted with people when they are processing. There have been people who have told me, like, I can't imagine life without my foot. It doesn't matter that the foot hasn't worked in a while. It's part of me, and it's going to the grave with me, even if it's the thing that puts me in the grave. So it comes as no surprise that a lot of people Sid or anyone else has gone through depression related to that. So I do not have formal training in that. One of my board members, who is also a bilateral below knee amputee, he is a certified peer counselor, and he does a lot of that work in his regular job and also kind of in his volunteer stuff. But we don't deal with it for ABR. That's not a super common all day, everyday occurrence because who we serve. So we're serving people who have already they've been wearing a prosthetic leg for at least a year. And the adults, we require them to run at least 3 5Ks leading up to it. So it's people who have already come to terms with where they are, what they have, and where they want to go. And they are a very forward-facing, optimistic group at that point. That's not to say that there aren't still challenges and struggles. There certainly are, but the subset of the limb different population that we work with is really those who have been through some of the worst things that you can imagine. Most of the people that we work with have lost their legs from trauma, like Ryan, cancer. That's actually I'll just give you some big stats. There are about 135,000 amputations done in the U.S. every year. 80% of them are for the elderly, diabetic, dysvascular, Medicare age person that has mobility goals of, I'd like to get from my bedroom to the living room. Maybe I'd like to be able to walk through the Walmart parking lot to get to the motorized scooter, something along those ends. So the other 20%, the 20% that are more likely to apply to us for services, it's 10% trauma, 5% cancer, 4% infection, and 1% congenital. So that's really, it's a different reason for a lot of things. So those people have already, if you've already gone through something where you were in a motorcycle accident, or you had bone cancer, or you had a terrible crazy infection and you went septic, or something like that, and they pulled through, they're really able to withstand a lot. There's a lot of mental fortitude, emotional strength that they have.
So you mentioned you have a board. How many people work at or work with ABR now?
Yeah, so I'm the only employee. So I, chief cook and bottle washer. But like I said, I have no formal training in prosthetics. So you don't want me making your leg. Don't worry, I never would. But we have a great volunteer base. So those 3 people that we had talked about, they still pour in a lot of time and effort. There's another prosthetist that works alongside Aaron here in Nashville, Justin Darm, who I believe he was the one who made the original contact with you. He also, he and his fiance manage our Instagram page, which is, I think, how we originally made this connection. So you've already interacted with Justin a little bit on the other side of things. But collectively, those 4 guys probably donate, hundreds of hours apiece every year. And then there's lots of other people doing a whole host of other things. So some on the mission, vision, fundraising, awareness, other support things that are more board role things. And then it's a lot of our athletes or their family members that also wind up volunteering with us in some capacity. And sometimes that's because we're so widespread. There are about 200 people that we've served in about 40 states. If there's someone new that applies, a lot of times we will try to connect them based on similarities, either geographic similarities or amputation level, reasons for amputation, what their profession is, anything that has some kind of tie that binds. And then they can reach out to them and say, like, this is what it's like to go through this process. This is, what it's like to go to Nashville and get a leg. These are also this is how I hold my leg on. This is what my running blade looks like. And a lot of education and advocacy work too, that we've really built a strong base with.
Since launching in 2011, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How many athletes have you been able to work with and help since opening?
So it's probably a little over 200 at this point. For the past few years, it has been somewhere around 30 to 40 new people that we're able to help every year, and then we provide continuing support for others as long as they are using what we have provided and they are paying it forward in a manner that I was talking about. That they are just being good ambassadors for what we are doing, and they are also trying to help others. That's the goal. It's frequently the children that we see the most frequently, year over year, because of course uh, they're changing and growing, and what works great for somebody today, they will probably grow out height, weight, both in a year, 18 months, 2 years, somewhere in that time frame. So this summer has been especially busy. It's now mid-August, so we're kind of at the tail end of it, but we've had a lot of back to school legs. So you think about all the things that you need to get ready to go back to another semester of school, and you have your pens and pencils and paper and binders, but a lot of kids also need new legs.
Yeah, certainly something you're not going to see on the shelves at Target or Walmart.
You just come over to my house.
Yeah, and it's we're heading into football season and cross country season, and even if it's not completely redoing stuff, it's, hey, what tweaks do we need to have so that you can be really successful in what your athletic goals are, not just academic goals.
You said you've worked in 40 states so far. Do you do any work internationally through ABR?
No, there's a huge need for better prosthetics and more people to do this kind of work. But right now, and some of it is just the ability to provide that continued help. So right now, we just have to focus on people within the U.S. I will say if anyone listening to this knows of anything like us that is out there internationally, I'm trying to create more lists with that. At least once a week, I get an email from someone in another country. Usually it's Asia, Africa, uh, some Pacific Rim, where people are saying, hey, I lost my leg and I've seen what you all are doing, and how do I get out there and get a leg too, or is there anyone that does this that could help me out? So I'd love to provide better answers than usually what I have to say is, I'm sorry, we have a U.S. focus. If you wind up moving here, that's an option, but it doesn't really make sense for someone to come here and we make them a leg and then they go back, and then we need to make a tweak, and then they have another $7,000 7,000-mile trip to make. So right now it's just a U.S. focus.
Makes sense.
You're based in Nashville, Tennessee. How do you go about getting someone fitted if they're not located within a reasonable driving distance? Sydney, for example, he's out in Utah. It's not can't exactly drop a hat and just drive down the road for that.
Yeah. So when they first come out, there is, we just have to say, hey, we are going to provide you with this leg, or Sid's case, 2 legs. Actually, in his, we wound up doing 4 because he does a lot of cycling as well. So, wound up with 4 different sockets. But, we can't do what we do without having a lot of real hands-on, eyeball to eyeball, touching people kind of experience. And it takes about a week if you just work like crazy and you work late hours, early mornings, weekends, everything else, where people get enough experience using the leg to make sure that we're making the right leg. So we say we're going to handle all of that. We will buy all of this stuff and we will make that which cannot be bought. But the skin in the game for our athletes is find a way to get here. Now there are families that actually, I'm right now in the guest bedroom at my house, and there have been a lot of ABR people who have wound up sleeping on the bed that I'm sitting on right now. But a lot of people involved in ABR that wind up helping out in that way of saying, hey, there's not a whole lot that I can offer, but I do have space here. For a lot of people, fortunately, Nashville is within a day's drive of the majority of the U.S. population. So a lot of people, it is yeah, sure, it's an 8-hour drive or less. But certainly, yeah, there are people like Sid and others further west that it's need to find a time, hop on a plane. But it also, the great thing about it is they're in a different environment, and I think it really opens them up to being willing to try new things because they know everything that I'm doing this week is all about making sure that my legs are going to be the best that they can be. So they don't have all of the distractions of, yeah, but I've got this work thing, so I've got an hour that I can go down to my leg and get something done. It's just you focus on this one thing. And as we all know, the more you focus on something, the better outcome you will have on that thing.
Right.
So if it takes about a week to make, sorry, Ben.
I was just gonna. So talking about all this, spending a week having someone come in, I have this an interesting connection to this topic. My dad's been a prosthetist for 30 years. I know how expensive this is, on top of all the other expenses of bringing someone in for that amount of time. Like, how does your funding work?
Sure. So, yeah, the cost for us to say yes to somebody, and I'm throwing everything in for the bilaterals like Sid or unilaterals or, above knee, there's there can be a wide variation in the cost, but the average cost for a new person for us is $3,500 in equipment things. It's great to have everyone else other than me volunteering their time. So there's a lot of cost that is there. It's just not, dollars changing hands. It's just, it's family and personal cost of people saying, I'm willing to give up spending time with my kids or wife or fiance or anything else. And it's about, on average, for the people that we continue to provide support for, it's about $1,850, so a little under $2,000 per person that we interact with each year. So that's really kind of what the cost basis is. And then it's a variety of fundraising. To me, it's really enjoyable to see, especially how people are able to leverage their own networks. I got a text message from one of our dads earlier this afternoon, and his birthday was Thursday, I think, and you've probably seen, the Facebook, hey, I'm going to donate my birthday to this cause. We have a lot of people doing that, and he was, really proud. He'd raised, $1,100. So we have a lot of people that do things like that where it's a lot of people giving a small amount, and then we have, like any other nonprofit organization, you have your big financial champions that stay with you, and they really get behind what you're doing, and it's more than just an emotional thing for them. It's, hey, I have the capacity of helping you out. There was one organization that has recently come on board within the past year that we went to talk to this organization, me and a couple of my users, my ABR athletes, a kid and an adult. And we got a phone call a couple weeks after, and the guy had said, so you said it was like $3,500 to take care of a new person. I was thinking, hey, they're going to give me $3,500. And I said, yes, sir. He said, so do you think you could help 10 people if I gave you $35,000? Yes. I had to pick up the phone off the floor. But so, yeah, there are people out there that they really have a sense of why we are doing what we are doing. And it's not just about, it's great to see people running or jumping or whatever the physical activity is that they couldn't do as well, they can do better now. But it really is more than just the physical thing. We have noticed improvement in a lot of different areas. People are a lot more confident. They're willing to try new things. And it's not just new sports that they're willing to try. Maybe they think, actually, one of the girls that was doing this presentation that I was referring to, she's either a junior or a senior in high school now, but she first came a few years ago, and it's a congenital thing for her, and both she and her parents just assumed that she would never be able to run. So, when she is in junior high and she comes in and she winds up, running for the first time, then she's like, okay, I can run. I'm going to try out for the cross country team. She ran with the cross country team, and then that gave her continued confidence. She said, "Hey, I wonder if I could make the debate team." So then she was on the debate team. The debate team wound up doing really well. They won the state championship. She spent time this summer at all of these different places in Princeton and Notre Dame, really developing that. So it was this blossoming. The majority of kids, when I talk to the parents, they say, yeah, grades have at least stayed the same. In a lot of instances, grades have gone up since we've gotten a running leg from you guys. So it really is, it's the ripple effect. We can impact one thing with what we know how to do, but it winds up, just moving further and further out there and changing more of that person, because it's all connected.
Do you do any fundraising events outside of, like you're saying, you had a meeting with one company or one organization? Do you ever put up, like a bingo or raffle or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so there are, we try to spread it out a little bit. We've got a couple of things coming up in the next, now this fall, once it cools off a little bit. We have always had a golf tournament fundraiser. So we are partnered for the past couple of years with the Nashville Alumni Network for ACC, SEC, and Big Ten schools. So they have done a tournament supporting a Nashville charity for the past few years, and we have partnered with them last year and this year. So that has been a big blessing for us. We also try to do other things where it's either a picnic style fundraiser or an evening celebration for existing athletes, some way of spotlighting things. It's the story, right? One of the most enjoyable things, and Sid did this with us, I think it was 3 years ago, but this is kind of the combination of raising awareness and raising funds. Are you familiar with the Ragnar Relay series?
I am not.
Okay, so Ragnar is actually based in Salt Lake, so pretty near Sid, but they have distance races. They have them as road races and trail races. I think it started doing a trail race, like the 8 Mile loop in Mount Zion National Park in Utah. But the road races that they do, the one in Tennessee, is from Chattanooga, 200 miles to Nashville. So for the past 5 years, we have had an all ABR, all amputee team running that. This will be the first year that we've got both. So that's a 12-person group is a regular team. So you run 3 different legs over a 36 or so hour period, and you can also have an ultra team where you can have up to 6 people. So we will have a 12-person group running 200 total miles, and we will also have a 6-person group running a total of 200 miles. So we'll have 400 miles run by 18 amputees. A few of them will be bilateral. It's going to be an amazing thing to watch. I probably should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about how I got involved. I had said, I've known these guys for a long time, but it was really when I was doing a Ragnar relay about 2.5 years ago, and I was just doing it for me. It had always been hey, we should do this, and I was doing it with my friends, and I had to train running in the winter, which I hate doing because it's a daylight issue. It's either you got to run in the dark and the cold, or you got to run on a treadmill, and between the two, I'm not sure which I like less. Right. So, but I did it. It was a mid-March run, so there weren't really leaves on trees yet by the time you get out there. So I was patting myself on the back pretty hard by the time we get to the race, and it's race day, and you pull up to the exchange, and you're seeing everyone out there, and I see the ABR team, like, oh yeah, I forgot about these guys, go see who I already know. And then I see everyone get out, and I realize, like, okay, there are 12 people on their team, and between the 12 people, I think there were 10 human feet. And it just makes you realize, like, hey, I thought I worked hard to get out there. These guys, Sid and 11 others, they worked really hard to show up and have fun and show others, like, hey, I can be out here and I can enjoy this race and we all have different challenges that we encounter. These are ours, and we're not letting us hold it back. So Ragnar has actually supported us doing that race. So our ABR teams have been able to run free with them, and then we try to use that as other fundraising things. So this year, one of our athletes who, in addition to being a 60-something-year-old amputee who runs 20 miles a week, bikes 50 miles a week, does CrossFit days that he's not doing those things, runs his own nonprofit for like crisis pregnancy things. And, I look at him like, I would love to be you when I grow up, and just have the tenacity that he has. And he's looking at us, hey man, it's the kids that you help. Like that's really what motivates me. Here I am motivated by Brent, and Brent is motivated by the little kids that we're helping. It's like let's each pick a story or some other kid that we can do our own fundraising for. Can we use Facebook to bring in more dollars? So we've got some goals around combining the athletic prowess of some of these really strong runners, but they are doing it in turn to help a 7-year-old kid or 12-year-old just trying to get into sports for the first time, or showing them like, hey, you can get back into it. Yes, you had cancer. That does not mean that everything is over for you. So we've got a few different ways of going about things, but those are some of the more fun ones.
So what sets ABR as a company, aside from the money that you guys are donating these legs, from others in the industry? I mean, as Sid did mention, you guys are the best in the industry. I mean, what makes your prosthetics better than the average?
Yeah. So I will say that really what it comes down to is passion and desire. When they first started making these things, the first guy that Aaron, Ryan, and Nick helped out, his name is Brandon. He lost his leg from bone cancer when he was in high school, and he was going to college in Nashville. Right when they had finished that conversation of, hey, let's help somebody. Like, oh, hey, there's this kid. He's playing basketball, intramural, whatever, but he's really getting after it, and maybe we can help him. And they went through, I don't know how many different combinations of socket, knee, running blade that they didn't work. It was not the right combination, or Brandon could break it because Brandon's just strong, and there's a lot that he can do. Brandon is actually now one of my board members, and he's a fantastic ambassador for our cause and everything else. But it's that learning. It's being able to say, there needs to be either I need more knowledge, or there needs to be better equipment. We have been very fortunate in working with a few different companies in different ways of, we encounter a problem and we say, well, we see this problem, and right now it doesn't appear that there actually is a solution. It's not just we don't know how to do this yet. It's the thing that separates failure and success does not yet exist. So it's, okay, how do you find other people to do that? So Phil Hour, which is a prosthetic manufacturer, their composites, their blade design folks are also in Utah. So Sid has interacted with them probably more than the average bear. But they have worked with us on, when we say, hey, can we ideate on something? Is there, what if we did this to a running blade? What if we did that? What if we helped them with, something with the 50-pound and under? That was a market that wasn't really being served or focused on. And we had said, hey, we got a lot of these kids that fit in this category. We would love to be able to offer them something better than what's currently out there. So kids and adults, a lot of times it's bringing people to the table and being honest enough to say, this is where the gaps are, and how do we move forward with that? So it's not just on the what you would typically think of as the prosthetic device things, although there's Aaron, Ryan, and Nick are all tinkerers and are always constantly trying to improve something, try something else, see if it works. I just sent Sid out a box of new things to try last week. So we're looking for people to think outside the box. One of my favorite stories of ways of doing that, and this just shows where gaps had been. So Daryl, who is another bilateral amputee, was running I think it was a 10K race into summer, Labor Day race. I think it was his birthday. He's 100 yards away from the finish, and how he has to suspend, how he puts his sockets on, or he rolls these gel liners. And those things, they're really good in a lot of ways. The downside of that is gel liners definitely are not these breathable things. They cause a lot of sweat and they retain all of that sweat. Mm-hmm. And Daryl wound up losing suction. He had sweat so much that he, popped out and fell out of his running blades, fell forward, landed on his shoulder, broke his shoulder, and was carted over the finish line on his birthday with his young son and wife. Had been cheering him on, and then see this moment of defeat. So that led us to realize, like, hey, we need better options for people that need to wear gel liners. No one likes running in a puddle. I have 2 feet. I cannot, I can't imagine what it's like to always stay in that. It would be like running in a downpour just on your feet all of the time. And you know what your feet wind up looking like after that. Residual limbs can look, like they've been through the ringer. So worked with a Nashville-based athletic sock company called Swiftwick, and they make great. Actually, I'm wearing Swiftwick socks right now, and they make. They use a hollow fiber olefin is inside it, and that can pull out a lot of moisture, and that's great for 2-footed runners. And we said, hey, can you make anything like this for people with limb loss? And they wound up making, it's probably 20 different sizes at this point, but it is designed to go to be used for an above or below knee or an ankle dysartic. So lots of different size variations, but that can pull out a ton of that sweat and moisture, so it's not running in puddles. So that's just another area where you just have to look at it and say, okay, this is not good enough. What else can we do? How can we make someone healthier? And sometimes it's it's just taking it's crowdsourcing problems. So a solution that Sid came up with that I tell a lot of other people, like, hey, he just takes, like a sweatband, a headband that you would wear on your head, and he puts that right at the top of his socket. So when it's, coming down his leg, he's at least trapping sweat before it can trickle down and get further into the problem. So the sock doesn't, it's just less that the sock has to absorb. So there are things like that where really it's just not being satisfied with inadequacy. And we're not there. There's still, we learn things all the time. We're not resting on our laurels. There's always more work to do.
Do you get a lot of input from athletes saying, well, option A has kind of worked, but I think if you could do option B, that would be better?
Yeah, so it can't, and several times it is, and that's part of why we say we want a week. Like if we were to just say we're doing it just our way and we're not really interested in your feedback or anything else, it would take a lot less time. But sometimes it's, hey, you hold your leg on this way, and that's how you historically have used a socket. Would you be open to trying something else? Yeah, sure. And you can say like, okay, maybe the other way is going to work better, maybe not, but maybe there are 2 different pathways that we need, and you need to go, run whatever it is, 1 mile, 10 miles, give feedback. Is this going to work? What could be different? And there are some people that you just have, more iterations of that, of, hey, so there's one of my other guys is in upstate New York, and I think we sent him tour. He had changed some things out, and we just wanted to see like, hey, we're going to send you a few different running blades, and you can attach and detach them and go do your routine and let us know what you like more, less, why, and we can use that for the next person that we help, but we can also use that to go back to the manufacturer and say, okay, for someone that does this kind of thing, he's at this weight category, he's at this amputation level, this is what his feedback is. And a lot of that, I think, is that we're working through right now is the difference between a distal mount, putting it at the bottom of your leg versus a posterior mount, which would be putting it like at your calf behind your leg. And what are the different ways of getting energy return out of that? How do you get the most? How do you get the most forward propulsion in all of that? And sometimes it's tinkering with things. But yeah, we always, we're not running in it. We need the user to say, this is what it feels like. And it takes a lot of effort on their part to be able to differentiate between all of those sometimes pretty minute changes that we're making.
So how does someone get in touch with ABR to begin the process of being fitted? I mean, do they go out and fill it out an application or submit a video? And how do you, as a company, decide who you're going to work with?
Yeah. So anyone can go. Our website is amputeebladerunners.com, and you can see the, I think it's Want a Running Leg link on there, and you can get to our application. The application does require a few different things. So there is just the who are you, where are you, why do you need this, what do you have now, kind of a thing. But we also want to know more about the person. So we want someone else in their community to speak to it. So a reference letter doesn't have to be from the prosthetist. A lot of times it is. Sometimes it's from physical therapist or the surgeon or the PE teacher or something like that. But really, we're looking for someone to say, I know who this person is, and this is what I have observed about this person, and this is why I think that this would be a blessing in their life right now if they had a running blade from ABR. We also want to know the same thing from the athlete. What's your goal? What can you do now? What do you want to be able to do? And why do you think that this thing is going to set you up for it? What we really don't want anyone to think is that a running blade is a silver bullet. A running blade can do a lot, but it's really, if you are on the right path and you are doing what you need to do, this can help that path be easier, and you can get to the end more, and you can bring along people with you. But for the same reason, the same basic idea anyway, that I can't go put on track shoes and be an excellent track runner. You can't put on a running blade and be an excellent runner. Like, you have to build up cardio, you have to build up muscles in that leg, in the other leg. You just there's a lot that you have to do, and we want people to know that. And then it's we want to see pictures and videos. Show us what your gait looks like. For the adults, like I said, we want you to run 3 5Ks leading up to the application. We're not asking you to set land speed records. We're just trying to make sure that people know this is the path that you got to be on. If you want to run in one of our running blades, then first thing you got to do is get out there and start moving. And it's okay if you're not super fast yet. Once all that is in, then we just have a series of conversations with them to make sure that we all agree at the process and the board level of this is the right person and right time, and we have the capability of helping them. So really, it's just it's people talking to people and seeing, okay, this is what you want. And sometimes if someone really just wants another shiny object that may or may not wind up being used a lot. Maybe it's just going to be sitting in the back of the closet. Maybe they just want another running blade. That's probably not the best fit for us. We are really looking for people who want to think outside the box with us, and they know what their limitations are, and they're open to trying a lot of new things or different approaches or a mindset or anything like that. We're really looking for more than just here is a running blade to attach to something and now go on and do your thing. It's a family when you come to us, so we just want to make sure that the new family member is going to be the right kind of person that we will probably be in association with for many years to come.
Do you ever have to have the conversation, I don't think we're the right fit for you now, but perhaps down the road?
Yeah, that is not a super common thing. Most people that apply, they wind up coming through. It's a, maybe it's a stage thing uh, because we spent all summer making lots of things for people, and we have a little bit of a backlog now on some other things happening. Uh, but sometimes it's a, uh, hey, you're not, you just went through this thing. Um, you lost your leg 3 months ago, and you want to get right back to everything, and we totally get that, and we want you to be there. But you also probably need to be wearing a socket for at least a year. You're going to have a lot of limb changes, and that's the timing issue. So even if everything else is there, there's a lot of swelling that occurs after an amputation, and your limb is just changing a lot. And we want to make sure, especially if you're coming from a long way away, but even if not, we want to make sure that the thing that we make, that, if we're going to give you a week of our time and a week of your time of taking off school, work, whatever, that this thing is going to work for as long as possible. So that's why one of the requirements that we have out there is you should at least be wearing something for a year before it makes sense to work with us, because we don't want to make the greatest leg that you've had and then 4 months later, well, I can't wear it anymore. I've shrunk too much. That's not the position that we want to be in. So we're just trying to make the longest term impact. And sometimes it's an emotional thing, and that's where our amputee ambassadors that talk to them, they get a sense of that probably better than anyone else, because they've been through that too. Of, hey, I know you can get there, but right now you got to get your mind right, and and we can help you through that, but first work on the mental aspect, and then the physical can come after that. And a lot of those people wind up over months or whatever completing those obligations, and they wind up coming through to us.
And once you do fit someone with their blades, do you help educate them on care and maintenance of the blades, or maybe their, in Sid's case, stumps or anything like that?
Yeah. So there's, and as far as, the training beforehand, I wind up having the same conversation. It's amazing in all of the, limb loss impacts everyone, and it doesn't really matter if it is, there's not really any difference between geographic location, socioeconomic background, what kind of amputation you had, why you had that amputation, how long ago it was that you had the amputation. A lot of people that are in this position of being really active, that they need something better. They don't know the things that they need to do with their own leg, the things that they can do right now to make not just running, but every day walking, digging ditches, whatever it is, they can make life a lot better in other areas. So there's a lot that we try to do even beforehand of what muscle groups you need to work out, how to desensitize your leg. If that would be the biggest thing, if people would just learn how to desensitize and how frequently to work on desensitization, that would be a huge thing. And probably every amputee needs to work on their hip flexors. That's the other thing that you see, like, oh, I don't know that I have the muscle control to control the spring that I'm now getting on this running blade. But yeah, once they're there, sweat management, what I was talking about with Swiftwick, that's another big thing that we try to work with people on. But what they can do with a 4mm wrench, there's a lot that you can do to change the angle of something, to swap out between your walking foot and your running blade, to how frequently you should be changing out the sock that goes in between your plastic foot shell and the actual prosthetic foot. A lot of people say things like, oh, I have always been told that I can't get in the water with this. And yeah, I don't really know of any prosthetic that you can't get wet. Now, you want to make sure, and you're rinsing it out with clean water, get the chlorine off, get the salt water off, whatever it is, dry everything out. But, there's no reason that you can't do these things. So there's a lot of things like that, especially for athletes. Like, it's Friday night and they're in a football game and they need something done, like, what are they going to do? Just pause the whole game and then come to Nashville and we're going to do something for them? Like,
Or just run
no,
over the
we
sideline and
want
duct
you
tape
to
it.
know what you can do, make those changes yourself. It should be about empowerment. So when we work with kids, a lot of it is pouring into the parents of knowing these are changes that you can make, and this is what you should be looking for, and this is what you can do. And you need to be able to give that to the kids so that as they age, they have this sense of freedom and independence that they might not otherwise have. We're not interested in building a lot of people who need us to do what they do. We look at people like, man, you guys are doing incredible things. How do we amplify that? Not how do we give you a crutch?
So, if someone's listening and they already have prosthetics, but they're not necessarily looking to be an athlete per se, or they're not looking for long distance running or whatever the case, can they just reach out to ABR, and if they just have questions, maybe they weren't given enough advice or the best advice at first, and they're just looking, how can I take care of what I have now?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We're always eager to help others, to spread the word. There are, like I said, there's just a general lack of advanced knowledge in working with active amputees because they're 20%. They're the minority of the limb loss group in the U.S. So when there is one population or one segment of the population that's 80%, that's what everyone focuses on. That's what the manufacturers focus on. That's what they teach you about in school. That's what insurance companies care about. It's this one thing, and then it's, oh yeah, there are other people, but well, let's just hope that this, I mean, a lot of times, you see a 7-year-old or a 27-year-old wearing a great diabetic leg, but that's what the leg was. It was designed with an old diabetic in mind. Um, and it's great if you're an old diabetic, but if you're not, maybe there are other things. Maybe your body can do things that it won't be able to do in a few decades, but for right now, teach it to be able to do these things.
Of course, if anyone's listening who would like to learn more about ABR or donate to the organization, where can they find you and how can they get in touch?
Yeah. So you can either go to our website, www.amputeebladerunners.com, or our social media pages at Facebook and Instagram. I believe it's both, facebook.com/Amputee Blade Runners. And you can make both on the Facebook page and our website. They're one of the first things that you'll see because, yes, we are a nonprofit. You will see a donate here, donate now, donate button somewhere on that. It's a little bit harder to find in Instagram. Instagram is just starting to figure out how to allow us to monetize, nonprofits to monetize, but they keep moving around where they put things and how frequently it can be out there. So yeah, that would be the best ways of reaching out. If anyone cares to do that, we'd love to just know, a little bit about you, why this meant something to you. I was just looking at it the other day. We've got around, I think, 350 people or so have given through Facebook just this year. So that's a lot of people that maybe it's just a friend of a friend that was served by us, or maybe they heard a podcast or anything else. So I always just like hearing how people came to us, but always appreciate the support.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to be on the show, taking out your evening, and thank you for everyone that's tuned into this episode. If you'd like to stay up to date with future guests in episode, make sure to follow the show on Twitch, and you can also find me on where'd my notes go? Holy cow. Find the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Rules of the Arena Podcast. You can also find this episode and others at blindninjastudios.com/ROA. Also available for download and streaming on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, and CastBox. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can watch live recordings of previous episodes. And don't forget to check out my new episode called No Story Left Behind, a podcast featuring military veterans talking about their careers while serving in the armed forces. If you'd like to support the show, there's a couple ways you can help out. Please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also support the show directly by headed to patreon.com/Rules of the Arena podcast. I have a couple ways you can help out there. If you'd like to get a hold of me or be on the show, please shoot me an email at roapodcastinfo@gmail.com. Thanks again, folks, and we will catch you next time.